puppies. What does this data suggest about how ear length is inherited and genotypes of the parents? So if you look at the offspring, you have 6 long-eared puppies and 2 short-eared puppies. If you reduce these numbers down, or divide both by 2, you can see that you actually get the 3-to-1 Mendelian ratio, where the dominant phenotypes occur more frequently. So the 3 represents the long phenotypes, which suggests that the long allele is dominant over the short-eared allele. So we can say that L, big L, equals long, and little l equals short. Now it also wants to know what are the genotypes of the parents. Well, if you're getting a 3-to-1 ratio, that means that both parents are heterozygous. And you could do just a simple Punnett square to refresh your memory on that. So you have 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive. So if both parents are heterozygous, you do get the 3-to-1 ratio of long-eared puppies to short-eared puppies. Problem 3 states that having blue eyes is a recessive human trait. Michelle Smith and her husband both have brown eyes and are heterozygous for the eye color gene. So the parentals here, we're going to write them as big B, little b, times big B, little b, which is a monohybrid cross, as you can see. So some parts of this problem are asking for 2 independent events, both the sex of the child and eye color. So let's just write the probabilities of each before we go through each part. So the probability of having a boy is 1/2. And the probability of having a girl is 1/2. Now for eye color, because both parents are heterozygous at this eye color gene, it's a monohybrid cross, which means that the probability of the dominant phenotype, which is brown in this case, is going to be 3/4. And the probability of the recessive phenotype, or blue in this case, is going to be 1/4. And you can do a simple Punnett square just to validate that for yourself if you wish. So let's start with part A. So if Michelle is pregnant with fraternal twins, what is the probability that both twins will be boys with blue eyes? So let's just do a boy with blue eyes. So the probability of having a boy, as we said, is 1/2. And the probability of having blue eyes is 1/4. So therefore, the total probability of having a boy with blue eyes is 1/8. Now, because fraternal twins are non-identical, it means they are a result of 2 separate fertilization events. So to have one boy with blue eyes, as we said, is 1/8. But to have the second twin be a boy with blue eyes is another 1/8. So if you multiply that out, the probability of both twins being boys with blue eyes is 1/64. So for B, says if Michelle is pregnant with identical twins, what is the probability of having 2 blue-eyed girls? So let's do it for 1. Probability of having a girl is 1/2, and the probability of having blue eyes is 1/4, which equals 1/8 again. Now, because the twins are identical this time, these are a production of 1 fertilization event, so it's basically 2 individuals come from 1 fertilization event. So the probability here is just 1/8. If one of the twins is a blue-eyed girl, then the other twin is a blue-eyed girl as well because they have the same genotype. Okay. For the rest of the parts, it says, assume none of the children are twins. So for C, if this couple has 3 children, what is the probability that none of the 3 will have blue eyes? Or in other words, what is the probability that all 3 will have brown eyes? So for this, the first child's probability of having brown eyes is 3/4, and the same goes for the second and the third child. And because we want all 3 to have brown eyes, you're going to multiply the probabilities across. So this probability is going to equal 27/64. Now keep that in mind for the next part. So for part D, says if this couple has 3 children, what is the probability that at least one child will have blue eyes? So if you're wanting to know the probability of at least one child having blue eyes, basically that's all of the outcomes that could be produced except the outcome in Part C where none of them have blue eyes. So for Part D, easiest way to do this is to do 1, which would be 100% probability, minus the probability that none will have blue eyes, which is what we got in Part C. And if you do that, you get 37 over 64. So that is the probability that at least one child will have blue eyes. It could be 1, 2, or 3 children having the blue eyes. For E, says, what is the probability of their first 2 children having blue eyes and their third child having brown eyes? So the first child probability having blue eyes is 1/4, because this is the recessive phenotype. The second child, the probability of having blue eyes is again 1/4. And the probability of the third child having brown eyes is 3/4 because it is the dominant phenotype. So if you multiply that across, you get 3 over 64. Okay. For F, it's similar but a little bit different. It says, if they have 3 children, what is the probability that 2 will have blue eyes and 1 will have brown eyes, regardless of order? So we know for 2 child having blue eyes and a third child having brown eyes, the probability is 3/64. We got that in Part E. But because the order doesn't matter, we could have brown eyes, blue eyes, blue eyes. We could have blue eyes, brown eyes, blue eyes. Or we could have blue eyes, and then brown eyes. Now the probability of each of these happening in order is 3/64, but we could have either 3. So what we're actually going to do is add the probabilities of each because they're mutually exclusive events. So when you add those up, you get 9/64 is the probability of whatever order you want, 2 children having blue eyes and then 1 having brown eyes. So for G, this is the last part. G states, if the couple has 3 children who have blue eyes, what is the probability that their next child will have blue eyes? So this is just a little trick to say, and it's the same with flipping coins. If you flip a quarter and you get heads for 5 times, it doesn't mean that the next time you're going to get heads. The probability is still the next time you have half chance of getting heads. So for this, it doesn't matter that the first 3 children they had blue eyes. The probability of their next child having blue eyes is the probability of any child having blue eyes, which is just 1/4. And again, that's because it's a monohybrid cross, and the recessive phenotype, it has a 1/4 chance of occurring. Question 4 states that short hair in cats is dominant to long hair. Using the data from the following crosses, give all possible genotypes of the parents in each cross. So first we can write down, because short hair is dominant, we can define big S as short hair and little s as long hair. So for A, we have 2 short hair parents giving 5 short hair and 2 long haired offspring. So because short is the dominant allele, we know that each parent has to have at least 1 big S. So these are the parents. For the offspring, we have 5 short, which again needs at least 1 big S, and 2 long. And because long is the recessive allele, we know that these 2 long cats are going to be little s, little s. It may not be obvious because it's not a perfect 6:2, which can be reduced down to 3:1. But because the sample size is so small, this is actually approximately a 3:1 ratio, which is typical of a monohybrid Mendelian cross. If you didn't catch that, the fact that you have to have 2 little s's to have long hair means that each parent must have a little s as well. So therefore, the parents here, instead of writing the dash, the parents are both heterozygous, big S, little s, and big S, little s. And that gives you the typical 3:1 ratio of short-haired cats to long-haired cats. So for B, it says a short-haired parent times a long-haired parent, and all the offspring are short-haired, which is the dominant phenotype. So we know that the short-haired parent has to have at least one big S, and the long-haired parent has to have little s genotype, and that's going to yield, this is the parents, and that's going to yield all short hair, which is at least, again, one big S. And this is the F1 generation. So in order for all of these to have one big S, that means that this parent has to be big S, or homozygous dominant. If it was if it was big S, little s, then you would expect half of the offspring to have short hair and half of the offspring to have long hair. So you know that this one is homozygous dominant. In petunias, purple flower color is dominant to yellow. If two plants heterozygous for this petal color trait are crossed, what is the probability that a purple flowered progeny is homozygous? Big P, big P. You may be tempted to just answer this from memory, but let's do a simple Punnett square to take a closer look. So you have big P, little p, big P, little p. So you get 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive. So as you can see, 1/4 of the offspring is homozygous big P, big P. However, the question asked, what is the probability that a purple flower progeny is homozygous? So that's the important trick here. So if you look at the phenotypes of these offspring, only these 3 have purple petal colors. So out of these 3, only 1/3 is homozygous big P, and it's this one here. So the answer is 1/3. Question 6 says that long stems, big L, are dominant to short stems, little l. If 2 heterozygous plants are crossed, which is big L little l times big L little l, what is the probability that a short stem plant progeny is heterozygous? So at this point you might recognize the trick in this question, but if you don't, let's write out the Punnett square to be sure. So you have big L, big L, little l. So you get 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive. So this is the genotypes of the progeny. The phenotypes, this one here is homozygous dominant, so that is going to be long. These 2 heterozygotes are also long, so red equals long. Now the 1 homozygous recessive, that's going to be the 1 short progeny, so green equals short. So the question says, what is the probability that a short stem plant progeny is heterozygous? Now the chance of that, the probability of that is actually 0, because if you are a short stem plant, you have to be homozygous recessive. So the answer equals 0. Question 7 asks, in the cross shown, what is the probability of an offspring being phenotypically recessive for all traits? To be phenotypically recessive, the genotype has to be recessive at each trait. So the genotype we want is little a, little b, and little c. The best way to approach this problem is to look at each gene individually and then multiply the probabilities for each being homozygous recessive. So for A, both parents are heterozygous, which means it's just a typical Mendelian monohybrid cross, and the probability of getting little a is 1/4. For B, both parents are homozygous recessive, which means that all offspring are going to be homozygous recessive, meaning the probability is 1. For gene C, one parent is heterozygous, while the other is homozygous recessive, meaning that the probability of getting little c is 1/2. When you multiply these probabilities across, because you want each event to be true, you get 1/8. So 1/8 is the probability of getting this genotype, which means that phenotypically it's recessive for all traits.